Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Rosie Murphy.
And I'm Sammy Roth, and this is the podcast where we talk about Lost.
We are midway through Season 2. This week we are discussing The Hunting Party, which means we are discussing Jack and Kate and a little bit of Michael.
Let's just go right at it.
As you probably know by now, we start all of our episodes off with hot takes, gut reactions, strong thoughts about the episode. Sammy, would you like to launch into your hot take?
I so badly would. My hot take is that Harold Perrineau, who plays Michael, he just does intensity so much better than Matthew Fox does. The scene this episode where he's got Jack and Locke cornered in the armory and he's yelling at them and he's like, I'm going to go after my son and you can't stop me and that's my right as a father and I'm going to shoot you and all that stuff. He's so enraged and so intense, and I really believe it in a way that when Matthew Fox does that as Jack, which he does all the time and makes his Jack face, I don't buy it in the same way. So kudos to Harold Perrineau for that. Rosie, what is your hot take?
More of a comment than a question, or whatever the hot take version is of that. At what point are Jack and the Jack-led forces just disrespecting Michael's autonomy and not just letting him go after his son? Like, if Michael wants to go after Walt, why not just let him? Yes, he's putting his life at risk, and there's not really any way around that, but by going after him, Jack puts many other lives at risk, as we see later. And I think if you had asked John Locke what he would have done in this situation, he would have said, like, you know what? Just let him go. And I think that might have been a good decision. I don't have strong feelings either way, but I think it's worth considering.
No, I think you're right on to be reading it as, about Michael's autonomy. And with Locke, I actually had a note to myself on this episode on Locke as a libertarian, and made a note of his line, "Who are we to tell anyone what they can or can't do?" Which I thought was sort of a fun twist on his usual, don't tell me what I can't do. I definitely was getting that vibe from Locke of, like, Michael is a grown-ass man, and if he wants to run around in the jungle waving a gun around, like, who are we to try to stop him? And also, why would we try to stop him? What are we doing out here?
Right, and also he's going to do this again. Like, Michael is single-minded in his pursuit of Walt.
Yeah.
What are we going to say that's going to convince him otherwise?
Well, that's what Leonard Dick told us, that they had that debate in the writer's room about, can Michael focus on anything else but this? And the answer they came to was no, he can't. And it's shouldn't be that hard for, Jack to see that either.
But, as discussed, Jack will always need someone to save and something to fix. Which brings us to the meat and the heart of this episode.
And this show, Jack Shepherd.
And indeed the show. Yeah, one could argue. So a lot going on here.
I feel like with Jack, this episode just gives us more and more examples of how the things that make him, a hero and admirable are just also the exact same things that make him insufferable. Yeah,
it's like you could add ... to a fault after all of his positive attributes. Like, he's tenacious to a fault. He's dedicated to a fault. He's so obsessive about these things that are good qualities that they go sour.
Right. Like, so we see in the flashback where he's so determined and obsessed to try to, to fix the old man by doing the surgery that he neglects and continues to contribute to the destruction of his marriage.
Right. Which I think we get the sense that he had already been neglecting for a long time, and
right.
Things were already
But the instinct that makes him want to fix that guy, I think, is the instinct that contributes so much to the falling apart of his relationship with Sarah as well.
Yeah.
Like, he is kind of, at least this is my read, and tell me if you disagree, but, like, it seems to me that he has sort of fixed her and has somewhat lost interest in her because he needs to move on to some, someone or something else for him to fix. Like, the Sarah project is done.
Ooh.
I mean, that was a much hotter take than I intended that to be.
but I don't think you're wrong, though. I mean, Jack blames himself. He tells her, "I want to fix this."
I promise you that things are gonna be different. I'm gonna work less. I'm gonna be here for you. Okay, I'm gonna fix this. We're gonna go back to the way things were. I'm gonna fix this.
But it had to
Yeah.
get so broken for it to capture his attention.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So when he
Ugh.
kisses the daughter of the patient, that's when he
Mm-hmm.
realizes that he's actually got something here that he has to spend time on because it's broken
Right.
and he has to fix it.
Right. And it's already much too far gone. And she's literally packed her things. Which, ooh.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of it being too late, we get the follow-up episode at the beginning of season 3, when he has the flashback in A Tale of Two Cities, as I seem to recall, where he's like basically stalking Sarah's,
Yeah.
the new guy she's with, and trying to figure out who it is. Like it's like
Yeah.
he can't comprehend that it's too late to fix.
Oh, yeah, that's so grim.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting to see that in relation to how he treats Kate in this episode, which is like his very aggressive insistence that she stay behind, despite, if I may have a moment, I'm literally waving one finger in the air right now to make my point.
I can confirm Rosie is waving a finger in the air dramatically.
Despite Kate having repeatedly proven herself as a very valuable member of the merry band of forest travelers. She can track, she can shoot, she can hold her own in these situations. And yet, Jack says stay behind out of clearly an instinct to protect her because he loves her or something like it. And of course she doesn't listen. And I kind of think Jack could have anticipated that. Like, that should not come as a surprise. But again, like, Jack just is the sort of person who I think thinks, because of perhaps some evidence in his past, that he can, like, set the universe based on the strength of his will. And he can say, like, I want this so badly that I'm going to make it happen. And that works. That's worked for him sometimes in his job as a surgeon and his ability to literally save people. But it doesn't really work when that power rests with other people. You know, he can't force Michael to not go after Walt. He can't force Kate to stay behind. He can't
They're not tumors
force John
that he can
Locke to
remove
do a
from
bunch
someone.
of anything.
They're
I'm sorry?
not tumors. I just said they're not tumors that he can remove from someone. They're people with agency.
Yeah. And I don't know that
Yeah.
Jack always gets that he can't move the world in that way, which is an interesting aspect of his character.
Well, it's like you said, everything to a fault.
Yeah.
Actually, I like that description of him a lot.
Yeah.
And honestly, and I'm with you on the thing. I'm so sick of him telling her that he's not going to allow her to go on the adventures. I mean, it's in addition to being infuriating, it's really problematic from a gender dynamics standpoint as well, which is a topic we've gotten into in the past. But I also, like, it was so frustrating also to watch Kate, like, to see Jack, like, continuing to see that Kate at the end and to watch Kate, like, apologizing to him.
Right.
I felt, and, like, oh, I'm so sorry, and when Jack says, I'm sorry, too, it's clearly, like, not an apology, it's, I'm sorry, I'm sorry you came after us also.
It just felt so withering, and I'm glad you felt that way, too, because I don't know that would read the same to all viewers based on their feelings about Jack, but it just felt like, yeah, Kate said genuinely, I am sorry for this thing that I did, and Jack said, I'm also sorry that you did that thing.
Yeah, that's exactly how I took it.
I mean, he's just blaming her for being captured. Like, and yeah, she got captured, but and again, like, I hate to bring this up, but it's so counter to what Sawyer does.
Don't beat yourself up, Freckles. You told me to stay behind, I've done the same damn thing.
No, and honestly, Sawyer would have done the same damn thing. And
Yeah.
Sawyer is, which is a different point. But no,
Right.
Sawyer, I'm with you on that. Like, he gets it. He understands that Jack was in the wrong here and that Kate was in the right, and he recognizes that and acknowledges it, and like he looks much better for it. It's a much better
Right.
look.
And despite Sawyer being very problematic in his own right,
Yes.
yeah, definitely comes out on top here. And while we are
like-
in this love triangle part of the plot, which we are for
Gosh.
pretty much the remainder of the season, and well into season 3, actually, we got a long way to go on this.
I also wanted to, something you just said made me think of this. Jack refusing to own up to the responsibility at the end for his role in this fiasco. I think we see the same instinct from Christian this episode, Where in that
Okay.
scene we get between Jack and we should talk about Christian too.
Yes,
'cause
we should. I have some thoughts.
His relationship with Jack plays into everything about who Jack is. But that scene that we get where Christian's telling Jack, like, there's a line and you can't cross it, and Jack is like,
Guess you would know.
May be okay for some people, Jack, but not for you.
yeah, and just totally deflecting personal responsibility even as he doles out this advice. Like, he's in the glass house throwing all the stones. And I think you see the same instinct from Jack to just, like, it wasn't his fault. It was someone else. Something went wrong, and it was. It's
It's
not
okay
on
for
him.
me to do it, but not for you.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I had a different take on this. I actually thought that this was like Christian was like kind of weird in a weird, twisted Christian way, actually trying to give his son some life advice. Like, again, because of Christian's many problems of his own, it is not particularly good advice, nor is it particularly clear advice. But I think what Christian is basically saying here is like, look, Jack, you are towing a line. Yes, I know this from experience, but I thought it's okay for some people, but not for you, was Christian saying, like, I know you and I know that this will tear you apart. Like, if you do this, the guilt and etc., like, that will just fuck you up. Whereas Christian is saying, like, yeah, man, I'm not that ethical. It doesn't fuck me up in the same way. Because Christian kind of lives in this relative morality kind of world.
Yeah.
Which, again, is like, this is not super ethical of Christian, but it is kind of, I think, his way of showing fatherly affection.
I don't disagree that it's bad advice that he's getting from his dad, but what do you mean about Christian's ethics? I'm curious if you could explain your thinking on that.
Like, I think Christian lives in a world where he does have some fatherly instincts towards Jack. Like, he wants to protect Jack from some of the worst that life has to offer. And not everything, right? We see many times that he does force Jack to be in situations that Jack does not really want to be in. But Christian actually seems to have it together in this episode, which is not something we see that often. And I think what he's saying is like, Jack, you live by a different moral code than I do. And I know what is okay for me. And I know what is okay for you. And I'm telling you that this is not okay for you. And Jack, because I think he lives in a world where that's much more black and white. And that's that morality that I think Christian carries is very, very gray and very relative. Whereas Jack would say, Jack throws the hypocrisy back at him and he says, well, you would know, like, you've crossed this line many times.
Yeah.
And Christian's saying, like, yeah, but you haven't. And those are different enough.
Right. But just to be clear, are we talking about the line being Jack's relationship with the daughter?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Right? That's what they're talking about here, right?
I think it is. I was thinking as we were just discussing now that there's sort of two things. One is there just Jack's obsession with the patient and fixing the patient.
And then there's the weird tension with
and then there's the weird tension
Gabriella,
with the daughter.
I think
But
is
no,
the
I think
daughter's name.
I think the tension with Gabriella is what they're talking about there. But
I think so too.
Yeah. But what you were saying was also, in addition to that, making me think about the other side of it, of the the obsession with fixing the patient. And we had this discussion way back at the beginning of season 1, where we get that flashback sequence at the beginning of Jack's first flashback, where Christian tells him the story of the patient that he tried to fix, and that something went wrong in the surgery and she bled out on the table. It was some story about a surgery gone wrong, and that Christian says, and I was able to take it and come home and have a glass of scotch and watch TV because I have what it takes and you don't.
Right.
And I think our discussion of that at the time was sort of that it seemed like Christian was sort of trying to cover up and hide the fact that it really did tear him up inside. And I think there was, and it's just making me think now, there probably was a time in Christian's life when he had this kind of intensity that Jack does and really cared and really wanted to, was really eaten up when he couldn't do it, or when things went wrong, and that at some points he gave up, or he snapped, or he broke, and he realized that really what he needed to do to be able to live with himself was to not care that much. Whereas Jack seems very determined that, like, if things go wrong, he's just going to care more and more and more until it literally kills him.
Right. Which I want to footnote on that point. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think that's a really good parallel, because you don't have what it takes is not that different from there's a line there and you shouldn't cross it. That's not okay for you. Like,
interesting.
Like, you could reword this to say, like, you don't have what it takes to have an affair. Like, that's kind of what the undertone is here, right? Like, he's saying basically, like, that will tear you up. Don't do it, because you don't have what it takes in this case is either a kind of nihilism or just a kind of apathy. And Jack definitely does not have any apathy.
Well, interesting, because Christian is totally right. He kisses her one time and goes home and immediately confesses the whole thing.
Right. And he is super broken up about it, perhaps because he knows deep down that his marriage is already quite well on its way to being over. But, yeah, I mean, he did not, indeed.
Does Jack have what it takes?
Which is, I'm sorry, that's like a dark way of reading this, but I think you're spot on in your comparison.
Well, I mean, thank you. But let's be more positive about Jack. I mean, this has taken a very, as you said, dark and negative turn, but, like, Jack's ability to continue to, like, push and fight and try to save people and fix things, despite, all of the obstacles thrown in his way, and despite, constantly suffering and losing, his marriage breaks up, Michael keeps running away, he gets stranded on a desert island and has to pretend with Locke and his faith-based things all the damn time. Like,
how annoying.
It is. But Jack's resilience in the face of all that is truly remarkable.
That's true. And when we see that against Christian as a foil, he never goes the fuck it, throw in the towel route that Christian has seemed to gone. In fact,
right. You said nihilism about Christian. I think that's totally accurate, but anyway. I'm really thinking now about this, you don't have what it takes because the rest of that line, the Christian, I forget the exact words, it's like you don't have what it takes when things go wrong, you're not going to be able to handle it. It was something to that effect about when things go wrong. And I feel like we've got to, and I love the comparison you made to the line this episode about the line that can't be crossed. And I think we've got to follow that track as we continue watching here.
Yeah.
Because I think that's so much about Jack's, his whole arc on the show.
Well, and I realize that Christian is condescending to Jack when he says these things, but I think he knows his son, and I think it's an accurate read. So, I think we should consider that.
I've told you that when I was doing that Lost script writing competition that I wrote a Christian flashback episode, right?
I think so.
Okay.
Do you still have it?
Somewhere, yeah. Yeah, I have all my old documents. I got it. Maybe I should share it with the listeners.
I was going to say, listeners, if you want to see Sammy's screenplay from the mid-2000s.
Give us your feedback. Tell us you want to hear it, and perhaps I will dredge it up and put it on Document Cloud.
Well, this was, I hope, a generous conversation about Jack. I do feel for him, as much as I disagree with his decisions. I do feel for him. But is anything about this different in hindsight for you?
Nothing huge and different in hindsight. But there were two lines this episode that I just thought were interesting, sort of foreshadows, where in very similar ways. One where Jack and Michael are arguing in the hatch, and Jack yells, "Are you going to shoot me, Michael?" And I just thought, ooh, like, you think Michael's not going to shoot anyone in the hatch, don't you?
Ooh,
about
soon.
that. And then, like, again, super similar when Sawyer says to Tom Friendly, "You and me ain't done, Zeke."
One of my favorite Sawyer lines.
It's so good. But then, like, that's how Tom ultimately ends.
That's right.
By way of Sawyer's gun. So two great foreshadows here of people shooting other people.
Yikes.
Anything stand out to you in hindsight?
Oh, gosh, the Christian stuff was going to be my hindsight.
Oh, stolen. Christian is such a good character. I would watch an episode about Christian.
I think I hated him the first time through because he's terrible. He's so mean. He has a secret family. He tries to convince Sawyer to go shoot a man. Like,
he's an asshole to everyone all the time.
Dude.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean he's not honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's very perceptive.
He's very perceptive. Even that one scene with Sawyer in that one bar. He tells him what he needs to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That was going to be my hindsight, damn it. Do I have to come up with another hindsight?
We can just go on to the interview if you want.
Yeah, so this is the second half of the interview that we played the first half of last week. It is with Dr. Jonathan Gray, who is a professor of television studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We're going to get into some of the broader stuff, which is just his favorite characters, his thoughts on the finale.
And also some more thoughts on what, how Lost would fare and how it would compare to other shows in the TV pantheon of today.
Is there anything else on this topic that you feel is important or that you still think about now?
I could talk about it forever.
That's fine.
I'm in general, I think I'm just fascinated by the fact that Lost made some of these choices. And because I think that's the other thing that bugs me sometimes with when we do encounter the rest of the world in so many other shows. It's in these outlandish stories about, I watched 24 and found it really enjoyable, but like that's not a life. Those aren't issues I'm wrestling with.
Right, right.
No one is ever going to make me wonder, do I need to torture this person to save the world or not?
Yeah.
Whereas like the characters in Lost are all trying to work out like what it means to be good, like how to deal with incredible loss, how to deal with pain, how to come together and create a community. I mean, these are all issues that really, really matter. And so situating questions about us versus them in that world seems so much more valuable to me than, getting me to speculate on how I would take down a foreign agent if, I had an AK-47 and had a split second to take the shot. That's never going to be me, but almost all the issues that, at a core level that the characters in Lost were dealing with are the issues of a contemporary sort of globalized world. And how do we live with each other? How do we encounter successive waves of newness when we've got a community and now there are these new people in there and then there's another fearful group and now we're told not to care about these people and then there's this. I mean, it's the relentlessness of it too that I think is really smart and endearing to me.
That's interesting because of course I am a fan of Lost, obviously, and of course I feel like it deals with all of these sort of profound but like very fundamental human questions. But to the point that you sort of started this conversation with about how still most American TV shows are very US centric, and like if Lost premiered in 2018 or 2019, obviously the medium has changed quite a bit. The way we receive television has changed. That is all different. But do you think sort of the cultural focuses or the cultural reception would be different, or would it still be something that was a little bit radical in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's radical. I think everything it's doing, it's still one of the only shows that's doing it. And I mean, I'll also you asked if there's anything else I have to say.
Yeah,
the only other thing I guess I note is that one of the things I really like about Lost is that, and it's something I like about The Leftovers too, is Damon Lindelof wants us to experience something before we get the message. And he realizes that we have to, that it's not easy. I mean, I loved the West Wing when it was out, but Aaron Sorkin is a different kind of being. If you think about it, like Aaron Sorkin writes you a speech on how you need to be a better person. He just got on a platform. Whereas I think, like what you see in Lost is this realization that no, things aren't easy. They're hard, and they should be hard. And so it never tries to, do what in some senses some people might have preferred, which is, like if Said was presented to us as, a great scholar of, I don't know, sociology or something in the first episode, and breaks all the stereotypes right there and then, and gives this speech about, how we all need to get along together. I mean, that would be a very sort of Aaron Sorkin kind of way of doing it. And it might be noble, and it would make for something good to be circulated on Facebook. But the real way in which this happens often is a little messier and murkier, and you need to be able to roll up your sleeves and spend the time and actually ask the questions and get to know the person better. And only after that process are you perhaps actually going to get to your to a better sort of realization of what makes someone tick.
Yeah, well, and that's an interesting, the sort of Aaron Sorkin speechifying idea is interesting, because I feel like Jack is the character that fulfills that role when it's necessary.
Yeah.
And I feel like
newsroom, right?
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that's part of why so many of us didn't like Jack.
Yeah.
Like, in one sense, he's this very moralizing, very speech-giving character, and yet he is so deeply flawed. And the other characters are all as deeply flawed, but they don't try to pretend otherwise, right? And I feel like that's part of what irks me about Jack.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for many fans.
Yeah, whereas you don't ever find in one episode. You really have to be in it for the long run. I mean, it's why what's frustrating about Lost is I have not been able to teach much with it. Not only because my students are now old enough or young enough that they didn't watch it,
right,
but also because you really have to, if you want to show anything with Lost, you almost have to show like 4 or 5 seasons worth.
Yeah.
Like, I can't just pull out an episode easily, because I think the lessons you're going to learn from Lost, you kind of have to earn them over several episodes, and I like that about it. I think it's a nice new mode of TV that thankfully some other shows really did learn from.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite characters or any favorite story arcs?
I'm really in it for Jin and Sun. As long as I saw them together at the end, I was going to be okay. I really liked Saeed, and I also just thought Ben was pure joy to watch.
He was.
Ben Linus basically commanded the show for a good couple of seasons, and that's not a criticism of anyone else on it. So yeah,
he was just an incredible character. Yeah, and you never knew what he was going to do, and incredibly fascinating.
So fresh, and again, someone who had so many motivations going on, but not. Never in an erratic way. I didn't feel that he was not understandable. I thought he just showed that some people are complex. Yeah. You alluded to this earlier, and I said we'd get back to it, so we may as well. Oh. You were a fan of the finale. Yeah, I really liked it.
What brought it home for you? How did it deliver?
So it's weird. My wife and I diverge massively over this. She wanted nothing to do with Lost. I couldn't convince her to watch The Leftovers because for her it was about plot and narrative, whereas for me it was about character. And I think in our discussions about that's led me to probably a really crude binary. But I think I see this with a lot of fans. Like if you really needed the answers, it's a horrible finale.
Yeah.
But if it became about the connections and the characters, then actually it's a really beautiful finale. I mean, it gives you go through pretty much all the relationships that matter in some sense. I realize that I'm in a bit of a minority. Have you watched The Leftovers?
No.
Okay, because I'd recommend that, because also what's nice about The Leftovers is like you get to see Lindelof learning that like clearly people wanted a bit more, and The Leftovers finale is amazing. It's probably TV's best finale, I think.
Yeah, no, I would really like to. And speaking personally, one of my favorite things about Lost is that it doesn't shy away from sort of the metaphysical questions. Like, it really leans into that hard, especially in the last season. And I appreciate that. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, no, The Leftovers is very much set in a... And I think the other thing that makes both shows really interesting is they're set in a world of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Like, I think that the sitcom ends happily. in Law and Order, we nearly always get the bad guy,
Right.
and even if we don't, it's more an exception.
We get him in the next episode anyway, or the next season.
Yeah. So the structure is nearly always set up to make us feel like relaxed, whereas I think Lost and The Leftovers exist in an uncertain world where and I think in some senses that's a lot more honest to the experience that a lot of viewers have. It's nice to escape into a world in which everything's perfect, but the truth is often a little murkier than that, and I appreciate that those shows are willing to do that and willing to engage with the fact that a lot of people dealing with loss can't get over it in 10 minutes. When hurts happen in Lost or The Leftovers, they're deep.
Yeah. Anyway, so the way we usually wrap up interviews with cast and crew is, what are you working on now? And I know that's a bit of a different question for your field, but what are the sort of topics that you're interested right now? Are there any shows that you find interesting from your perspective as, a scholar on these issues?
Yeah, I in terms of shows that I'm fascinated by, I have yet to finish The Americans, and I think The Americans is similarly just really good at messing up your mind about like who we are and
who is good and who is bad, and
I appreciate that. And Deutschland 83 is another one that works in it. It's kind of like The Americans in German show, but fantastically done, and again 80s nostalgia, but I really like that. And then in terms of my own research, I'm working on an audience project on why people hate the things that they hate. So that's and again, some of that perhaps was born out of studying Lost and then realizing that half the people that loved it ended up absolutely detesting it. I'm interested in sort of, when you say you hate something, what's really going on? Because there's lots of studies out there about why people love the things they love and what fandom is, but there's not much work on what really engaged dislike means.
That's very interesting. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that I feel like there were a lot of people who loved Lost right up until the end. And that was able to, their whole perspective just completely flipped. And I understand if, maybe if the end feels like a betrayal, you might react very strongly to that. But that's still surprising to me. Like, even doing this show, I talk to people who say, I love Lost, but I hate the finale.
I've seen it. Yeah. One of the things I find really interesting in studying dislike is how common betrayal is, actually. That often the things that people say they hate the most aren't the things they think are the worst. They're the things that they hoped would be better and they betrayed them. Yeah. And so then, that leads up to a show that you follow for, 7 seasons and then it betrays you. It didn't betray me, but to many people it really did. Yeah. I think it's interesting to ask then how does that betrayal work, and what was it that it didn't give you?
You know what? I want to read his paper about what viewers hate. I would like to learn why people hate what they do as well. It's a good question. One thing to note, this episode marks the first appearance since the season 1 finale of Tom Friendly. You should go back and listen. We had an interview last year in our episode on Exodus, the season 1 finale, both parts of Exodus, all the parts of Exodus. We had an interview with MC Gainey, who plays Tom Friendly. He is wonderful. He was so much fun to talk to. He was just thrilled to be chatting about Lost. He had a bunch of thoughts on the light 'em up scene from this episode, which he clearly loved to film. So you should go back and give that a listen.
And next week we will be watching Fire and Water, take your pick.
Which is the episode where Charlie tries to baptize Aaron and Locke punches him.
Oh no, I kind of forgot that happened.
Oh boy. That all happens.
We are also going to go back and listen to some more details from Mark Goldman, who we heard early on in season 2 in just one episode, but we're going to talk more to him about his experience as one of the editors working on the show, who worked on things like pacing and cuts, and a really, really fun perspective, one that I loved.
He's super neat. As always, please subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Player FM, iHeartRadio. We're on YouTube. Pretty much you can find us everywhere. And if you enjoy the show, ratings and reviews are always nice.
You can also talk to us on Twitter at The Hatch Podcast and on Facebook at facebook.com/The Hatch Podcast.
Our theme music is by Andy G. Cohen, and our cover art is by Danny Raw.
Talk to you soon.
Namaste.